The question for the day is, could Congress manipulate federal elections to stay in power? Well, if we go to Federalist number 60, Alexander Hamilton's back, and he responds to one of the most suspicious fears that the anti-Federalist, has about this. And that is, if Congress can regulate the time, the place, and the manner of federal elections, then what stops them from tilting the rules in their favor? And Hamilton's answer to this is, well, the Constitution itself stops Congress, and its structure makes the election manipulation nearly impossible. I'm Matt Haskell. I'm a high school history and civics teacher, and we're making our way through all 85 of the Federalist Papers, and we're up to number 60, so we're really in the home stretch here soon. Let's go ahead and set the stage for number 60. Now, the Anti-Federalists had raised a pretty dramatic scenario. What if Congress uses its power to limit elections? So like to redraw districts to favor the wealthy, or to put farmers at a disadvantage, or to favor the coastal elites, silence certain regions of the country, or just to skew the electorate towards one particular economic class. So Hamilton, in his essay here, he doesn't mock the fear that they have. He takes it seriously, and he tries to answer it as directly as possible. At Hamilton's core, his core argument here is that he'll argue that Congress cannot manipulate elections on a large scale, and largely because, one, the states, they still retain that primary control, and two, that Congress's power in this is rather limited. Three, if we manipulate elections, then that would require just an impossible amount of coordination for the time. Then representatives, they come from diverse regions and also diverse economic backgrounds. The Senate and the House check one another, and then finally, the people would revolt against obvious abuses of power. So in short, Hamilton says that the system is just too complex to rig. Now, Hamilton will first attack the idea that Congress would want to favor the wealthy or the elite, because he argues that, one, the House is filled with members that are chosen by ordinary voters. The Senate represents states with totally different interests. And so then a conspiracy requires shared motive, which doesn't exist. Now, the representatives reflect the diversity of the nation, the farmers, the merchants, the professionals, the frontiersmen, and so a united aristocratic scheme would collapse immediately, according to Hamilton. Now, why doesn't Congress have this power? Well, even if Congress wanted to manipulate elections, Hamilton says that they lack any kind of exclusive control, because states set the district boundaries and the voter qualifications and the election procedures, the registration rules for voting, and then just the local administration of the elections. Congress can alter when and how, but not who can vote and not where the districts are. So the states protect themselves from national overreach. Here's Hamilton's practical point as to why Congress doesn't have that ability. Because rigging elections requires coordination and secrecy and shared initiatives, long-term planning, and then identical goals across the states, none of which Congress possesses. The diverse interests make conspiracy mathematically impossible. And as Hamilton puts it in the essay, no two states want the same thing badly enough to plot together. Now, that brings us to the next part of his argument, which is where we have the Senate versus the House, because as another safeguard, the House is chosen directly by the people, and the Senate is chosen by state legislatures. At that time, this is before the 17th Amendment. Now, these bodies represent different interests, so a coordinated election scheme could never survive both chambers. If the House tried to help the wealthy, then the Senate would block it. And if the Senate tried to help the elites, the House would block it. It's built-in mutual distrust. Now, his next point would be the people would not tolerate this manipulation. And so Hamilton ends with a strong democratic warning. If Congress ever tried to rig elections, the people would see it immediately and they would respond through elections, through state governments, through protests, and then through replacement of corrupt. So no manipulation could survive public outrage. So the people are the final safeguard. So as we look at Hamilton's reasoning here, his chain of logic, Well, his first thing is that Congress lacks the motivation to manipulate elections. I mean, it's out of their purview. Congress then lacks exclusive power over elections. His third point is that Congress lacks the ability to coordinate any kind of scheme. Fourth, the House and the Senate would block each other. And then finally, the people would overthrow any attempt. There's number 60 in 5 easy steps. Now, Hamilton's tone. He writes with a kind of a calm confidence as compared to number 59. He sees the election manipulation not as impossible in theory, but impossible in the system. So the Constitution's complexity is what's going to protect liberty, because it turns suspicion into the structural checks that exist within the Constitution. Now, Hamilton's deeper point is rather moral, because power is safest when it's divided, especially when it's divided among the institutions that don't fully trust each other. So, the founders weren't naive. They knew ambition exists. They knew corruption is tempting. So instead of trusting human nature, they instead trust the structure of the Constitution. The Constitution's design then prevents large-scale, electioneering almost automatically. Now, the fear that the Anti-Federalists had sounds very modern. Election interference, gerrymandering, voter suppression, class favoritism, partisan manipulation. All this stuff is very real, and it impacts us right now. And those debates are found back in Federalist number 60. Hamilton tries to remind us that manipulating an entire federal election system requires more unity and secrecy than Congress has ever possessed. Now, it's Congress that we're talking about here doing the manipulation. Now, today we're worried about special interest groups and dark money and things like that. When we're talking about Congress trying to manipulate it, it's held up by the structure of the Constitution. Now, the risk does exist, but the Constitution does have strong checks. Now, our takeaways from this one today would be, 1, that Congress does not control elections alone. 2, even if Congress tried, it couldn't coordinate a national manipulation. And 3, the people remain the final check against abuse. Now, as we kind of wrap this one up, number 60 here is Hamilton's argument that the structure of the Constitution creates a natural defense against election manipulation. The federal government cannot hijack elections without the cooperation of the states. The states cannot sabotage elections without federal oversight, and it's the duty of the people to watch both. And in that 3-level system, no one actor can rig the entire mechanism. Now that's the genius of the design. Now I understand we have the advent of the internet today and technology and things along those lines, but we've progressed. And so it's important to remain vigilant and to keep an eye on the powers that control our elections, and be aware that there are people that are out there that would want to rig elections. But as far as Hamilton's argument is concerned, we're talking about Congress here when it comes to protecting election integrity. So if this particular episode helped you understand why Congress would have a difficulty in rigging federal elections, I hope that was the point I was trying to drive home. Go ahead and share this and get it to somebody that has an interest in government or has concerns. And hang around, that's probably more important, because in our next episode, I'll be talking about Federalist number 61. And in 61, Hamilton's back, and he's going to dig into how election rules actually get written. Thanks for hanging around for another long one.